Somewhere in occupied France, the summer of 1944, a French resistance fighter crouches behind a stone wall at the edge of a country road. In his hands is a weapon that looks like it was assembled from spare plumbing parts in someone's garden shed, because it was. The barrel is a length of steel tube. The stock is a single bent wire. The magazine feeds from the side at a right angle, which is wrong, which everyone knows is wrong, which nobody had time to fix. The whole thing weighs less than 7 pounds. At the time, a decent pair of shoes cost more. He has been waiting 3 hours. The German staff car is late. When it finally appears around the bend, he steps out from behind the wall, raises the weapon and fires. 12 rounds. The car stops. The war in that particular stretch of road ends in approximately 4 seconds. He picks up the brass, melts back into the tree line, and is gone before the echo stops. The weapon in his hands was the Sten, and the story of how it came to exist. Built for almost nothing, despised by almost everyone, and then used to help liberate an entire continent, is one of the strangest and most important stories in the history of British arms. Just months earlier, the Royal Navy had chosen quality. Its Lanchester submachine guns were heavy, expensive, and built like precision instruments. The army could not afford that luxury. Britain did not need the perfect weapon. Britain needed millions. The Navy had its answer: built to last, built to cost. The army needed something else entirely. To understand the Sten, you have to understand what Britain looked like in the summer of 1940. Dunkirk had just happened. More than 300,000 men had been pulled off the beaches, which was a miracle, but the miracle came at a cost nobody talked about publicly. The British Expeditionary Force had left behind nearly everything it owned: 68,000 vehicles, 500,000 tons of supplies, 2,500 artillery pieces, and 90,000 rifles. The army that came home from France came home alive, but it came home empty-handed. If Germany had attempted an invasion in the weeks that followed, it was a documented contingency. The Thompson submachine gun was the obvious answer. America had them. Britain had ordered them. But the Thompson cost $45 per unit at a time when Britain was nearly bankrupt. The Atlantic supply lines were under U-boat attack, and the quantities needed ran into the hundreds of thousands. There was simply no version of the Thompson solution that worked at the scale the crisis demanded. What the War Office needed was a submachine gun that could be built in Britain, in existing workshops, by workers with no specialist firearms training, from materials that were already available, in quantities measured in the millions. At a cost so low it was almost offensive. 2 men answered that requirement. Their names gave the weapon its name. Major Reginald Shepherd was an inspector at the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield. Harold Turpin was a designer in the same building. Between them, they had decades of experience with the mechanical realities of mass production. What tolerances a stamping press could hold. What a semi-skilled worker could assemble in 40 seconds. What happened to a steel tube under sustained automatic fire. The receiver was a simple cylinder of steel, the barrel screwed in from the front. The magazine, the famous side-feeding magazine that everyone complained about for the entire war, was a design borrowed directly from the German MP-28, which meant it was already proven in combat and already understood by the machinists who had to produce it. The stock was a single piece of bent wire that folded under the weapon, reducing its overall length to something that could be stuffed inside a coat. The trigger mechanism had exactly the number of parts needed to make it function and not one more. The complete weapon could be manufactured in 5.5 man-hours. At a time when a Lanchester, the Navy's submachine gun, cost £6, the Sten cost less than a working man's weekly food budget. Eventually, more than 4 million Stens of various marks were manufactured across the entire war. It became the most widely produced British firearm in history, and almost everyone who carried one hated it. If you're following this story, hit subscribe before we get into what happened when the Sten went to war. It takes a second, costs nothing, and it keeps this channel running. The complaints about the Sten were not petty. They were specific, documented, and sometimes fatal. The magazine was the first problem. It was derived from the German My P-28, proven in combat, simple to produce. But the British copy introduced a flaw that would haunt the weapon for its entire service life. Inside the magazine, 2 columns of rounds had to merge into a single feed point before entering the chamber. Under field conditions, that merge point became the weak link. Never grip the magazine itself, hold the housing. Handle it carefully, or it would betray you at the worst possible moment. They learned all of this the hard way. The second problem was more dangerous. The Sten fired from an open bolt. When the trigger was released, the bolt sat forward in the receiver with a round already chambered, not predictably, but enough times, in enough documented incidents, that the Sten developed a reputation for killing its own users. British paratroopers jumped into Normandy in June 1944, knowing that a hard landing could discharge the weapon strapped to their body. Some taped the bolt handle in place. Some jumped with the magazine removed and fitted it after landing. The solutions were soldier-level adaptations to a weapon, level design flaw that was never fully resolved. There are accounts of Stens going off when dropped during training, during patrol, during the simple act of setting a weapon down on a hard surface. The army investigated, issued guidance, and continued producing them at the rate of 47,000 per week because there was no alternative. And yet, in the hands of people who understood it, they were packed into canisters and parachuted into fields in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Yugoslavia, and Greece. Resistance networks that had been fighting with hunting rifles and captured pistols suddenly had a weapon that could empty a magazine into a German patrol in 3 seconds at room clearing range. The Sten's simple construction meant it could be serviced with tools that were available in any workshop. Its breakdown into components meant it could be hidden inside a loaf of bread, inside a Holloway book, inside the lining of a coat. The side-feeding magazine, which everyone complained about, made it easier to fire from the prone position than any top-feeding design would have been. The Sten became the weapon of the French Maquis, the Norwegian resistance, the Polish Home Army, the Belgian resistance. It appeared in the hands of Yugoslav partisans and Greek guerrillas fighting in terrain so rough that resupply by any other means was impossible. In Warsaw in 1944, during the uprising, Polish fighters used Stens alongside locally manufactured copies, the Błyskawica, built in underground workshops from the same basic principles, because the Sten's design was simple enough to replicate from memory and scavenged materials. The Germans captured enough Stens to study them carefully. Their assessment was precise. The weapon was crude. The tolerances were loose by German engineering standards. The finish was, by their description, industrial rather than martial, and they used the captured ones anyway, because a crude weapon that fired 9mm parabellum, the same round the Wehrmacht used, was a useful thing to have when your own supply line was stretched. The Sten was also used for something beyond conventional combat that most accounts skip over. So agents in the field were sometimes instructed not just to arm resistance fighters, but to commit targeted assassinations. The Sten was too loud and too large for close-range assassination work. That was the Welrod's territory. But for ambushes of German vehicles, attacks on small outposts, and hit-and-run raids on supply convoys, the Sten was the weapon the SO relied on. In Norway, resistance units used Stens in the attacks on heavy water facilities that helped deny Germany the nuclear material it needed. The raids at Vemork in 1943, one of the most strategically important sabotage operations of the entire war, were carried out by Norwegian commandos armed partly with Stens. There is a quiet arithmetic to that fact. The weapon that cost 9 shillings played a role in operations that may have altered the outcome of the war itself. By 1944, the Sten had evolved. The Mark V, introduced that year, was a deliberate attempt to address the complaints. A pistol grip replaced the bare steel tube. A proper wooden stock replaced the wire skeleton. A front handguard gave the firer something to hold that wasn't a hot barrel. The Mark V retained the bayonet lug, making it the only Sten variant that could accept a blade. a refinement that gave it a credibility the earlier Marks had never quite achieved. British paratroopers carried the Mark V into Normandy. It was still the same basic Sten, but it looked, for the first time, like a weapon someone had thought about rather than simply manufactured. The Sten served through the Korean War. It appeared in the hands of Israeli forces during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Israel had manufactured its own Sten copies, called the Carl Gustav and later the Madam, in underground workshops before independence and in open factories after it. Long after the British Army had replaced it with the Sterling, the Sten was still somewhere in the world, still being fired, still occasionally jamming, still occasionally killing people who expected it to jam. The final production total was somewhere above 4 million. No precise figure exists because the records are incomplete and the manufacturers were too busy building them to count carefully. There is a photograph that captures what the Sten actually was more precisely than any technical specification. It was taken somewhere in France in 1944. A man in civilian clothes stands in a doorway. He is holding a Sten at his side, magazine out, bolt forward. He looks like a farmer or a schoolteacher. He is not posed, he is just standing there, waiting. The Sten in his hands looks exactly like what it is, a piece of steel tube with a trigger attached. What the photograph cannot show is what happened after it was taken, what the man did next, what the weapon in his hands was about to be used for, and why the fact that it cost 9 shillings and looked like plumbing was precisely what made it possible for him to have one at all. It was dangerous to its user. It was unreliable under pressure. It looked like it had been assembled by someone who had never seen a gun before. Those two facts are not in contradiction. They are the same fact. The Sten existed because Britain needed something that could be put into the hands of every man and woman willing to fight, regardless of whether they had training, regardless of whether they had money, regardless of whether they were a soldier or a farmer or a schoolteacher standing in a doorway in occupied France waiting for the war to come to them. That was the Sten. 9 shillings, 4 million made, and a continent that is no longer occupied. The next weapon in this file is one that almost nobody outside the men who carried it ever knew existed. It was not dropped into fields by parachute. It was not handed to resistance fighters. It was issued one at a time to specific men for specific jobs in specific places. And when those jobs were done, the weapon disappeared back into the dark as if it had never been there at all. That story is next.